I used to hate mixing. Yeah, I really did. It's hilarious to be saying that in the same year that Dolby selected my song Buy a Thread with Echo Zoo to demo their next generation Dolby Atmos sound system technology, but it's true. I used to hate mixing and I used to really hate myself for sucking at it. So in this video, I'll show you how I broke through to the other side. I'm going to tell you how I found both joy and success in my mixing to the point that I can reliably beat all the high-end professional mastering engineers that I used to pay thousands of dollars to. And if you care about your sound quality and you want your tracks to be as loud and as clear as your inspirations, I can get you there, but you have to watch till the end. Don't worry though, it won't take long. Time will fly by, and it will be fun the whole time. I promise. All right, so back to the story. I used to hate mixing. It felt like an arduous technical chore best left to pro engineers that I couldn't afford yet. And in the meantime, I felt powerless and humiliated as I tried again and again and again and just kept failing. It was the worst. I'd think I was onto something, and then last night's genius always seemed cringingly naive in the harsh light of dawn, and even more embarrassing when I would compare it to my heroes. Try, fail, repeat. Try, fail, repeat. Over months and then years, I watched my passion for music turn into poisonous self-doubts that only serve to water a growing and seemingly inevitable depression. Maybe I should just give up, I would think. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm just not that creative. Maybe I'm not cut out to be a musician, blah, 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 blah. And all those insecurities turned me into a plugin junkie because it seemed like every magazine article and every plugin promo video knew exactly what I was going through and had this magic bullet that would be my shortcut right to the finish line. So like a good consumer, I dutifully bought plugin after plugin only to find myself right back where I started. As it turns out, all the shortcuts of the world are just shortcuts to the realization that there are no shortcuts. The truth I was avoiding was simple. Unless I wanted to hire a ghost producer, I could not buy my way past the necessity of learning to mix. If I was going to become the producer that I wanted to be, I would just have to suck it up and study. So I did. I spent decades sucking it up and studying so that now you get to learn the easy way in a fraction of the time it took me. Sound good to you? Right, I thought so. All right, here we go. So over years of studying all the best mixes, all my favorite tracks, all the most revolutionary mixing engineers, a pattern began to emerge. And this pattern among the most revolutionary mixing engineers in history, the people who defined the art of mixing, seems obvious to me in retrospect, but that's the mark of true genius, right? Genius always seems obvious in retrospect. That's why you hear people say ignorant things like, that's so simple, anyone could do that, or my kid could have painted that. But the truth is, if it was so simple, then they would have done something equally revolutionary, when in reality, the people who say stuff like that are usually motivated by their own lack of results. They are haters. So don't expect them to understand what it takes to actually make something great. Anyway, so the pattern that emerged among the most revolutionary mixing engineers in history is something deeper. They broke the rules so well that they transformed their fields, leaving a permanent, timeless mark on the field itself felt decades later. So how on earth did they do this? How did they know which rules to break, and more importantly, why? Right? So like a 5-year-old might break all kinds of the rules and color outside the lines on every page, but they don't revolutionize art itself by breaking the rules. What is the difference? How and why do great artists break the rules and push their art forwards? How and why do great artists break the rules and push their art forwards? So the answer to these questions is perfectly illustrated by the story of the creation of dub music. No, I'm not talking about dubstep. I'm not talking about reggae. I'm talking D-U-B, dub music. Do you know why they call it dub music? So dub is a name which comes from the word dub plate. And a dub plate is a one-off custom test pressing used by vinyl DJs back before CDJs and software like Serato came along. These were metal discs that were the size of a 12-inch record, usually, or a 10-inch, that were covered by acetate, which is a soft, crayon-smelling plastic that is easy for the cutter to carve musical grooves into. So while it's less expensive than producing a run of vinyl records, they still cost about $100 in today's money and would wear out after about 100 plays because the acetate was soft. So let me tell you how a studio accident led to the creation of dub music and why it's called dub. All right, I'm going to hydrate first. All right, so the story of the happy accident that birthed dub music and changed the world forever takes place in Jamaica in the late 1960s and early 1970s. This is like where sound system culture was born, okay? Like if you like listening to loud music with a DJ, this is where it started, okay? So there's this guy named Rudolph Ruddy Redwood. He ran an enormous sound system that brought people from all over the island who were seeking an escape from the grinding poverty of post-colonial Kingston, Jamaica. And Ruddy and his crew of sound system DJs would play the hit records on one turntable while they would get on the mic and toast. And that's where you say a couple rhymes about the record that you're about to play or like big up the crowd or whatever. It's kind of like hosting. So the DJ and the MC would typically be the same person and they would change records by toasting live on the mic. And they would kind of keep the energy going while they flip the record. Like you're not going to be flipping a record in silence. That's weird. So anyway, Ruddy, I'm going to call him Ruddy. I don't know him personally, but that's what people called him, so I'm going to call him Ruddy Redwood. Ruddy's job wasn't an easy one. There were many other sound systems to compete with, and the party people only had so much money to spend, right? Because it's Jamaica. So if you wanted these people to spend their money on your sound system events when they couldn't afford to eat well, you'd better be bringing something nourishing to the table, right? So in addition to a high-fidelity sound system, top-earning DJs needed to have new, unreleased, exclusive tracks all the time in order to set themselves apart from the competition and justify higher ticket prices. So these DJs, their lives were just like a constant quest for the best dub plates on the entire island of Jamaica. So reggae music and sound system culture was exploding in popularity in the 60s and early 70s. So the demand for dub plates, coupled with the dire economic situation of Jamaica, meant studio engineers working long hours on little pay, often past the point of diminishing returns, and frequently sleeping at their studios, which is like the perfect storm for creating workplace mishaps. So one day, Ruddy gets a dub plate from Duke Dumont's studio that was supposed to contain a pre-release song from the popular band The Paragons. The thing was, the overworked engineer had accidentally left the lead vocal track muted when the dub plate was cut, leaving only the instrumental backing track. So when Ruddy made the fateful decision to just go ahead and play this dub plate anyway, because, he paid for it after all, he plays this dub plate that has no lead vocal, just the rhythm and the bass, just the rhythm section, just the backing track. So when he plays this anyway, the audience explodes and they're like, rewind, 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 play that record again. And so Ruddy plays the record several times in amazement with his DJ buddies. And they're just like, whoa, this place is exploding. Like, what's going on? So as it turns out, leaving the lead vocal off of the record allowed the dancers to focus on the drums and the bass while the DJ could hype up the track and keep toasting through the song, giving a live energy to the performance that was irresistible to the dance floor. So this accidental creation of an instrumental mix, this was like the first remix. And these were called versions at the time. So these early remixes, called versions, led to increasing demand for alternate instrumental mixes of popular songs. So reggae backing tracks then became known as a rhythm, and that's where the word rhythm that you get in the very non-reggae like subgenre of dubstep comes from that. And studio engineers became increasingly creative in how they used their studio gear to modify these backing tracks and rhythms and make them different, make them special, make them like, VIPs, remixes, versions, etc. So for the first time, the mixing engineer stepped into the role that we now know as a producer and became just as important, if not more important, than the players on the records they made. So artists like Osborne, King Tubby, Ruddock, and Lee Scratch Perry developed different methods for actually playing the mixing board during the recording sessions, such as routing a delay send back into itself so that a fader on your mixer becomes a playable feedback on the control on the delay. And if you ever see like a dub mixer playing live on an analog mixer, they'll almost always do that, where they have a mixer channel that is serving as the delay feedback. So instead of having like a tiny knob, you have like a big, nice fader that you can play. And then they would make homebrew electronics like spring reverbs, sirens, or King Tubby's famous analog high pass filter that he made. So King Tubby was like a real like electrical engineer, and he didn't even really consider himself like a producer, right? Because remember, this is like the first time that the producer was a creative part of music. And King Tubby loved to build electronics, and he would build like, dub sirens and spring reverbs and high passes. But then he also built sound reactive LEDs that were inside of his custom sound systems in the 1970s. Okay. So the techniques and the equipment that these early sound system pioneers created went on to become the backbone of modern music production. And a lot of the aesthetics that we have and like sound systems and partying came from these early dub musicians, and dub came from this accident. The exact thing you're not supposed to do was leave the vocal off, and that mistake led to them, like breaking even more rules and like having the engineer play the mixing board like an instrument. That's crazy. So toasting made its way to Jamaica, or toasting made its way from Jamaica to New York via Jamaican DJ Kool Herc. And when he brought toasting to New York, it kind of morphed into the art form we know today as rap. Versioning and versions became remixing, or making a VIP, which stands for variant in production, not very important person. So this combination of the like live combination of a high fidelity sound system, a DJ, and an MC that came from Jamaica is something that will be with us as long as a guitar, a drum kit, or a piano keyboard. Okay, so I'm saying all this to underscore the point that the technical side of mixing, mastering, even soldering electronics is not an uncreative chore. It's not an afterthought. It's not a necessary evil. It's not even boring, okay? Like when you actually get into it and you get into learning the history of it, and even learning about hardware. I used to think like everything hardware could do, I would do in my computer. And while that's true, there are certain techniques and certain sounds that you don't really understand until you learn about like what's an 1176 compressor and what's like a LA2A, and like why do we care about these compressors from like the 1960s or whatever, right? But there are certain things that a lot of the plugins that you use are going to be designed to emulate these classic pieces of gear. And when you understand like what made the classic piece of gear a breakthrough, a lot of the time you can have these like big mixing breakthroughs just from studying history, right? But you don't need much to mix, okay? You don't need crazy monitors, like all this stuff, all my synths, all that's extra. You don't actually really need anything other than a pair of speakers and a computer, sometimes not even that. Like the beat for Humble by Kendrick Lamar, Grammy-winning beat, made on an iPhone with GarageBand, which is free and came with the iPhone. It's insane. A Grammy from an iPhone. I knew a producer once who was on a record with Aphex Twin while he was homeless. Like, all he had was a stack of burned CD-ROMs and a pair of headphones. He didn't even have a computer. He would just use other people's computers while he stayed at their house. It's crazy, right? And Skrillex famously made Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites, which was like, at the time, like, it was like crazy producer, like every producer was just losing their mind over this record. And he made it on a tour bus in not a treated room on like consumer grade KRKs, and one of them was even busted. So you really don't need a lot. You don't need much to mix properly, okay? And the people who are telling you mixing is too hard and that you should leave it to the pros and all that are either ignorant, if we're being charitable, or else they are trying to trick you out of your money. That's because marketing teams that get hired for like plugins or gear or whatever, they know all about the mixing nightmare that producers experience when they start out. And these marketing experts know just what to say to trigger all your insecurities, because that's how you sell stuff. You don't sell stuff to happy people. You sell stuff to people who are sad and feeling insecure and feeling like they're not enough, right? And these are marketers. That's their job. They're good at their job, and they know just what to say to trigger you. So I have no problem with advertisers when they're selling something that actually is awesome and that helps. Like, when I get the right targeted ad and it's something that I care about, I'm like, oh, cool, sweet. Or like, if it's really funny or whatever, like, great, But manipulating people to sell them something that does the opposite of what it's supposed to do, I get mad about. And a lot of the gear and shortcuts and plugins that people sell you, they actually make it more complicated to get to the finish line, and not actually, like, I know some people who have like every like how to cheat at music theory plugin and stuff, and they've been geeking out on them for like 5 years. And I'm like, it's been 5 years. If you just spent that 5 years playing the piano, you'd know how to play piano and you wouldn't need all these cheats, Like, there comes a point, like, time's gonna pass. If you could spend 5 years learning how to like fake piano, or you can just suck it up and learn the piano, But yeah, so that's getting upset about marketers and like middlemen and stuff. It's a big part of why I choose to teach workshops when I could earn just as much money making music and touring. All right, I am an unapologetic idealist when it comes to music, and I want you to seize the means of music production, because the simple truth of it is this: the missing ingredient. It's not some plugin, it's not some outboard mixer, it's not a hardware processor or whatever. Once you have a basic mixing setup, you're pretty much good to go. Other than a computer and a sound card, the only thing you like need is a nice pair of monitors and a decent sounding room, and that's it. And like, a mic if you're trying to record vocals. But that's it. So have you ever noticed that you never see ads for high-end studio monitors and acoustic treatment? Well, that's the way it is when people know that you're making something that's actually essential. The customers will come to you, okay? So most of the ads that target music producers are for things that you don't really need, like shortcuts, cheats, ghost producers. And recently my feed is just all about advertising MIDI files. MIDI files. I'm like, really? Like, who is buying MIDI files? But I mean, clearly people are, because I keep seeing these same ads. But like I said before, the truth is these cheats and shortcuts do not actually help. Okay, nearly all the established producers I work with avoid all the cheats and shortcuts for the same reason they avoid watching too much Netflix, right? It is a pointless distraction. And the long way, when they're all like, oh, don't take the long way. You can learn all this the long way. It's so hard. It's such a bummer. And they go on and on and on about this long way. It's a myth, okay? Learning mixing isn't hard. It's not even that long. It's not a chore. And the more fun you have, the more you keep coming back, right? So this like terrible obstacle they're using to sell you stuff, it doesn't even exist. Okay? It doesn't even exist. Like, mixing, when you get into it, is fun. When you approach mixing as like, oh, I can't do this, it's too complicated, studying's pointless, I need a shortcut, I can't trust my ears. I can't like blah 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 blah. That whole notion is like just created by like advertising and music magazines and stuff to just kind of like string you along and keep the money coming. So if you want to know what you're really mixing, is finding joy in your work, because time flies when you're having fun, right? So the question you should be asking is not like, what's the shortcut that I can take, or like, how can I cheat at mixing, or who can I pay to do my mixes for me? The question you should be asking is like, what makes mixing more fun? What makes mixing more expressive? What do producers really need to know? And how do we transform mixing from a technical chore to a creative joy? Because like, think about like just the liberation, the creative liberation of like guys like King Tubby and Lee Scratch and like all them, like, they weren't even like, I'm an artist. They weren't like, I'm a producer. They weren't like, they didn't have any of those labels that we have right now. They were just like, that's cool. What happens if I do this? Like, let's experiment. Let's mess around. Let's find out. Like, this is a crazy noise. Like, we hooked up a spring to like a guitar amp. Whoa. Like, just think about that level of creative liberation. Like, there's such a template for like, what you're supposed to be as like a DJ or a producer or whatever, where it's like we all have this idea of like this right way to do it. But the innovators, they're not like, what makes them like so liberated is like when you're in uncharted territory, no one's done any of it. And like the simplest thing, like all the simple ideas are open, when you're in new territory. But like when you're trying to make like a 80s synth jam, it's like, yeah, all the good simple melodies on like a Super Saw are taken because everybody's been making Super Saw 80s music forever, right? So like, of course, everything is going to kind of sound like another song. But when you can break out of that and kind of like do something with the mix or something with your relationship to technology where you're using the machine in a new way, or you're using you're like, because new technology is cool to a point, but like all the new plugins, for the most part, they're not trying to be better at doing the same stuff. Like it's rare that you get a plugin that does like one of the basic things different or better. And when it's the basic things, like when you can flip a basic thing on its head in some way, like, investigate the fundamentals and then figure out like what has not been done in this area of fundamentals. And there is always super basic stuff, like look at artists like Camo and Crooked, like they come into this genre, drum and bass, that's been around for like 25 years. And they come up with this new style that is like all like light and like, everything is like delicate and like breaking apart and pretty, and like the sound design is like these analog synths with like digital glitches and like these tiny little snares, and they're not using like amens and stuff like it. It's just like, when you question a fundamental assumption, or you just like you do something fundamentally different, then suddenly everything is on the table again. And that's the kind of place that you want to get to with your mixing, when you can figure out a way to break the rules in like a new but fundamental way. That's when everything opens up, and like, it's like if you hear electronic music that is not sequenced with a metronome, for example, it sounds so different because literally every single producer is like using a metronome and using the grid. And when you hear stuff that is like just not sequenced with a metronome, it sounds insane. You're like, whoa, this is so fresh. And like, yeah, you've heard all those sounds before, but the structure is fundamentally different, like at a fundamental level, So Anyway, so I want to explore all this with you, but it can't happen in just an hour. It can't happen in 2 hours. It took me literally decades to learn this stuff, and I'm still progressing and leveling up every year because there's no right or wrong in music, right? There isn't. There isn't. Every assumption needs to be challenged. Every orthodoxy needs to be questioned. Every rule can be broken if you break it well. So I will teach you how to break the rules like an artist. And if you don't think that breaking the rules is what you should be doing, you're not understanding the history of music. Because the history of music is there are rules. Someone breaks the rules and does something that you just don't do or that is considered absurd or ridiculous by the people around them, such as leaving the main vocal off of your record or playing the mixer like a music instrument, right? Someone will question a rule, and then other people are like, oh my God, why didn't we think of that? That makes us all look like uncreative idiots. And then that thing that was a broken rule becomes the new rule, and then that becomes old and stale and boring, and then someone else breaks that rule. And that's how music grows, okay? So breaking the rules gave us jazz music. There was a point where if you went out to a jazz club and your parents caught you, they would like disown you. Like people were like, you're listening to jazz? That's not music. That's just a bunch of noise, you know? Breaking the rules gave us sound system DJs because DJing is technically illegal. When you buy a record, if you buy like a vinyl record from a major label and you look on the side, it says unauthorized public performance is prohibited by law. So that means it is technically illegal to publicly perform a record at all. DJing is illegal. It's just not enforced, right? Breaking the rules, of course, like in my story, gave us dub music. Breaking the rules gave us scratching. Don't touch the record. Breaking the rules gave us the golden era of sample-based boom bap hip hop. Like if you like, you know, Wu-Tang Clan, like Tribe Called Quest, and you know all that stuff is like sample-based. That's technically illegal. Breaking the rules led to people using the 808 drum machine to make bass sounds. It doesn't say anything about using the 808 to make bass in the manual because it is a drum machine, right? Same thing with the 303. The 303 was originally supposed to play bass lines so that you could like program in the patterns for your song, and then you'd play guitar and it would like go through the bass line. You could practice along with it. But it was like a total flop when it came out until some awesome rule breakers in Chicago turned up the knobs on the 303 until it went and made that squelchy, ravey acid noise that created acid house and created raving and created all of that. What's from using the 303 wrong? When you use a sampler wrong, quote unquote, you get glitches. When you sample those glitches and make music with them, you get the genre of glitch music, one of my favorite genres of all time. When a playback medium is less than perfect, you get low fidelity. You know, every mixing course ever tells you, oh, fidelity, fidelity, fidelity. You don't want low fidelity. But then why does lo-fi sound so good? Right? Do you get the point yet? So I could do this all day, and I'm sure you could think of tons of examples I didn't mention on this list, but that's because that's what music history is. Okay? Music history is a litany of rules being broken so well that they change the game. And that is what makes an artist stand out, is breaking the rules. So if you're thinking about mixing as like, there's all these rules I gotta memorize, there's all these frequencies I gotta memorize, I gotta learn about like every piece of gear, I gotta learn about this, that, the other thing. Not really. What you gotta figure out is, you know, what targets you're aiming for with reference tracks, and you got to figure out what the rules are. Like making music, at least electronic music producing, it's like much more about like creating a spectrum than it is about creating a sound, you know? Like what drum machine you use, what synth you use, etc., the instruments, the notes, like all that is secondary to creating like a spectral composition, like highs, lows, stereo, effects depth, punchy transients. Like, what is this? Is it like a prickly sparkle? Is it a slow, smeary wash? Is it like, dark and ominous? Is it like, noisy and broken? Like, what kind of a spectrum are you creating, right? And when you think about it as like, what are the rules of these spaces, right? How are these spectrums composed, right? Then it's going to start making a lot more sense, right? Because, it's really all about creating like a feeling, like the sound is like architecture for your emotions, and it can be the simplest song in the world. Like, I mean, there's some songs that I like that are literally just a drum machine and swearing, and that's the song. And they make me feel great. They make me have a profound musical experience for what it is. And I love those songs. And then there are songs that I listen to that are like, like symphonies and stuff where people like the super serious people dedicate their entire life to learning one instrument that costs as much as a house, and then there's like 30 of them in some like $500 million room. Then that's the music, Is one of those things better than the other? Like, is a drum machine with swearing better than a symphony? Depends on what kind of mood I'm in, So really, breaking the rules, challenging everything, approaching music as like a spectrum, that's more important than learning about the gear, learning about the notes, learning about the playing techniques, even lyrics. It's more important than that. Is like, what are the rules of the spectral behavior? Are there more highs in this part? Are there less highs in this part? Is there more bass in this part? Is there less bass in this part? Is the bass more punchy and progressive and like tuk, 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 tuk in this part? And is it more like and flat in this other part? What are the dynamics of the spectrum? What is the volume in the spectrum? Just start thinking about it in terms of like highs, mids, lows, and then dynamic. Like how percussive is it? How steady is it? And when you break it down in terms of the spectrum and figure out like what are the rules of the spectral space, that's when you start discovering the fundamentals for you to question, right? And breaking the rules, questioning the fundamental assumptions that remain unquestioned by your peers is what makes you stand out. So if you think like, oh, most of the music out there sucks, good. Okay, good. That's a great attitude to have. I mean, don't go around telling everybody that because then you're like a hater. But you can like privately think music sucks and that's fine, Like you're not a hater unless you go around hating on things. Like you can privately have your opinions on music and that's fine. Like there's lots of music that I don't like, but it makes people happy. I'm not going to go around taking people's joy away like a dick, but there's music I don't like. That's fine. You don't have to like everything. And if you think most of the music out there sucks, that's good. That's the attitude that leads to questioning fundamental assumptions that are holding everyone else back. Okay, so hold on to that feeling, question everything, and come to your own conclusions. So I'm going to give you the method I use. I'm going to give you the knowledge it's based on and a step-by-step system that will get you your tracks where you need them, where you want them. But you need to understand it's not dogma, okay? I'll tell you precisely which rules I gained success by breaking, but I didn't break all these rules just to end up with a newer set of rules. And you should not interpret the system that I'm giving you as a set of rules, okay? All right, so when I was much younger and I couldn't mix and master a record to save my life, I booked the genre-defining Dave Tipper to play 2 of my events in Toronto. Okay, as part of the deal, I had to let him stay at my house and use my studio for a week, and I also had to supply him with weed. It was a great setup, but it made it very hard for me to pay attention to the statistics again I had that week. You win some, you lose some, right? Anyway, so at one point we're discussing something seemingly unrelated, and I ask the question, why? And Dave replies, ah, why? The only question worth asking. And that statement, like it stopped me in my tracks at the time, and it's also kind of haunted me for the rest of my life. So adopting Dave's philosophy has really helped me out as a thinker, as a musician, and as an educator. And part of the reason why I found that so shocking to be like, the only question worth asking is in philosophy, like especially academic philosophy, which is what I was taking at the time. Why is often derided as the great sophomoric question. It's considered infantile or juvenile or whatever, but I suspect that attitude in academia is like sour grapes, which is like a dismissive resentment of the asker because of the insecurities unleashed by exposing flaws in the system. So if you want to find and exploit flaws within any system, then why is the best question to ask. So start with why. Okay, so starting with why, it's a famous TED Talk for a reason. Starting with why works. By repeatedly and relentlessly asking why, I've learned that pretty much all of the widely accepted things on this list that I'm going to give you are in fact completely wrong. If you currently believe any of these statements that are on my list of things that are wrong, please don't take this part personally, okay? And please understand that I myself believed every one of these things at one point too. But you are not your beliefs. You're not. You are not your beliefs. I'm attacking falsehoods, not you, okay? All right, so buckle up. Here comes a list I like to call Everything You Think You Know Is Wrong. Okay? And I call it that because everything you think you know is wrong has become my mantra. By assuming everything I've been taught or everything that I've assumed is wrong, I examine my assumptions one by one and ask, are they really serving my purpose? You know, why? Why am I assuming this? Why? What is this assumption based on? And if the statement or principle or, explanation that I have for something, if it can withstand me relentlessly asking why, then I keep them. But when they fail, that's where the magic is. So I am not going to tell you exactly why in detail every one of these things is false, because we would be here for a very long time. But I can summarize the list for you. And I remember I posted like an early version of this list on Twitter, and Subtronics like retweeted it and said, I want to scream every one of these things from the mountaintop. And I was just like, validation. Yeah, because it's a serious list. The Subtronics is a great producer. Whether you like his style or not, he is a good producer. I'm a fan. All right, so here's my list of things that are the everything you think you know is wrong list. Okay, number one, mixing is hard. Nope. Who says it's hard? Why did I say it hard? Say it's hard. Good mixes take a long time, or good mixes take a lot of work. Not true. Plugins and gear make mixing easier. If only I had that plugin, that shiny object in my studio. No, plugins and gear make mixing more complicated. Like, it takes me way longer to do a mix with hardware than with software, and you got to really mean it. You got to really, really mean it to mix with hardware. Okay, it does not make mixing faster. It does not make mixing easier. There's a right way to mix. Wrong. No, I need to go to one of those fancy $50,000 a year audio schools to be a pro. Nope, not true. And then that goes well with, I need to pay a professional to mix and master my song. Not true. I can just fix it in the mix. Don't say that while you're producing. Just get the sound to be dope. If it's not dope, get a different sound, because I'll fix it in the mix. Usually doesn't end up getting fixed. It doesn't. Mastering will fix my song. No, 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 no. Mastering is not for fixing things. Mastering is for getting things to a comparable volume level of the music that you're trying to, mix in with. Okay? Mastering is not there to fix things. You should fix everything in the mix, and then mastering. A lot of my best mastering is just redlining the Ableton Master like a noob. It's crazy. I never thought I would do that. It seems so wrong, but that works. It really does. And anyway, I have a whole class on clipping and about redlining the Ableton Master and stuff. It's great. Anyway, so other things piece of advice that you get at really expensive audio schools or YouTube or whatever, every sound needs at least some processing. Not true. Every sound needs at least some reverb. I've got that one a lot before. Well, you see, Dylan, all sounds in the natural world have at least some reverberation, so you need to have at least some reverberation on your sounds if you want to make a natural soundscape. No! Some of my favorite music has no reverb on anything. Right? And then one of the biggest ones. Okay, so these are huge, these ones. And you see people go on and on and on about these. Like anyone who questions these things is an idiot or you're a jerk if you think these things are true. But try them out for yourself. Okay, so digital clipping is bad. Oh, I believed this for so many years. But I had to learn that I was wrong. Digital clipping is not always bad. There are certain tasks, such as micro peak removal, that digital clipping is the best possible thing for. Phasing is bad. Sounds being out of phase is bad. Not necessarily. A lot of the best techniques come from putting things out of phase. Noisy recordings are bad. Not always. Losing fidelity is bad. Not always. Things that sound bad when they're soloed are bad. Oh my God. I wish I knew that one earlier. Sometimes the fact that something sounds bad soloed is what makes it sound good with the rest of the sounds. And things that sound good when soloed are good. No! Just because something sounds good all by itself does not mean it's the right thing for your song. Oh my God, this causes so many problems. Only choosing things that sound great soloed is a problem. Aggressive EQ is always bad. Nope. Sometimes aggressive EQ is the best thing you can do. Cut, don't boost. You probably heard that one. That's not true. Or don't boost more than 3 dB. Unless it's appropriate to boost for more than 3 dB. Maybe that makes it sound awesome. Depends what you're going for. This is one of the ones that, if I had a time machine, I would go back and scream this in my face. High pass everything except for the kick and the sub. Good God, don't do that. Okay, because EQ works like noise canceling headphones. And when you high pass everything, you are adding a sine wave to the bottom to cancel out the frequencies that are there. And it messes up your transients. It can mess up your stereo image. All kinds of stuff gets messed up when you add a high pass. But you're not listening for that. You're listening for, is the bass gone? You're not listening for, what's it doing to the high end? Because the assumption is a high pass only affects the low end. But nope, it affects everything on the channel. Everything on the channel. The highs, the stereo image, the transients. High pass does some damage, man. It does some damage. Now, I'm not saying never high pass things. I'm not saying EQ always sucks. But I'm saying you should know how it works, why it works. Unless you have a really good reason to use a high pass, unless you have a really good reason to use an EQ, don't use anything unless you have a really good reason to do it. Okay? Memorizing rules and collecting infographics is helpful. Not really, actually. Not really. No. Because the people who are who have the shit hot YouTube channels and Instagrams and stuff, that's their job. That's why their channel looks so much better than everyone else's, is because they don't have anything better to do than sit around getting people to follow them and advertising at them and stuff. That's their job, not music, right? So a lot of the time, the nicest infographics will have the wrongest information. And when you're not a seasoned producer, you'll be like, oh, this looks really professional. It's got the word pro in their Instagram name. And like, look at how well they can use Photoshop. Right. But yeah, don't memorize rules. Don't collect infographics. Don't. It's a waste of time. Okay. Tools work best when you read the manual. Oh, God. RTFM. Not necessarily. A lot of the best producers never read the damn manual. Tools work best when you use them for their stated purpose. Really? Not the turntable, not the 808, not the 303, not anything you make glitch music with, not anything you make lo-fi with. Always do X. Never do Y. Usually false. Every sound needs to stand out as a separate thing. No. A lot of the time, having sounds that are trying to actively avoid the listener's attention is more important, you know? And I call these ninja sounds. And a lot of the power of my music is created by sounds that nobody knows are there. They're just there to like thicken things in the right way, right? But all kinds of like white noise and, you know, synthesized fundamentals underneath things and stuff are just there just to play their part, but they're not trying to draw your attention at all. I can make my complicated mix work. Fuck no, don't do that to yourself. You're going to make your life hell. That's too simple. People won't be impressed by that. Oh, if there's one thing people love, it is really simple music that still works. Like if you can make music that works with less stuff, you are winning. And then this one was me so bad for like years. I can make up for my bad mix by flexing in other ways. No, don't. Just give us a good mix. It's not hard. Just give us a good mix. So every one of these statements is like common wisdom at the $50,000 a year audio schools, but not one of these statements, not one of those statements can withstand you repetitively asking the simple one-word question, why? Why? Ask why enough. Every one of those universal common truths falls apart. And when you know the truth behind each of those falsehoods, it once again seems obvious in retrospect, but that's the mark of genius, right? Look for it. Real genius seems too simple to be genius, right? Real genius seems too obvious to be genius, but that's part of what makes genius. So if all that's not true, what is true, right? All right, so how about these two? Have you heard anyone say less is more? And have you heard anyone say just use your ears? Do you remember getting this advice, right? We all have. Again and again, ad nauseum. So while these statements feel cliche at first, they're cliche for a reason. And the reason is they're great advice. It just takes a bit to unpack them before you get anything actionable. And under certain circumstances, they could be terrible advice, especially if you just say that to someone who doesn't really know their way around yet. These can be terrible advice. So let's start with less is more. So less is more is usually taken as promoting minimalism, as sparse compositions are famously far easier to mix than complex ones. If loudness and clarity is a goal of yours, then there's nothing better for it than minimizing the number of simultaneous sounds, which I encourage you to refer to as compositional density. Okay, the number of sounds at the same time, compositional density. I love teaching people that term because when you think about that and you write a number that represents the compositional density and you have like, you know, when you're analyzing a track and you're like, oh, the compositional density is like 5 here, it's 1 here, it's 0 here, it's 3 here. Holy shit, you can learn a lot about a track by just writing those numbers on a timeline. It's awesome. So as you study the songs you love, make note of the changes in the compositional density as the arrangement progresses. All right, so normally people are saying less is more, as in reduce your compositional density. All right, but while minimalism is great, it's not for everyone. I know lots of people who actively try to avoid making minimal music, right? So I find myself in like common use. I find myself commonly using less is more as a principle to encourage elegant, musical, solutions. Okay, so that means those solutions which accomplish their goal in the smallest number of steps. And that's because every process comes with a cost, and that cost is fidelity. Okay, reprocessing sounds is amazing for certain types of sound design, like neurobass, for example. But on vocal mixes, one is typically aiming for a more transparent feel. And that's because like there's special modules in your brain where you just hear vocal sounds differently than other sounds. But your brain is always looking for what's known as vocaloid formants, which are indicative of a human voice. And it's the most sensitive between 2 and 4 kilohertz, which it's hypothesized that because that's like the frequency at which baby crying usually happens, that's we're the most sensitive to that. But that's also where all of the like consonants and articulation in speech is. Like if you cut out from 2 to 4K in my vocal, you probably can't understand what the hell I'm saying. So we're always listening for vocaloid formants in the pain zone, right? And because we have more like brain modules dedicated to hearing the voice, anything that sounds like kind of artificial or manipulated about a human voice is going to be a lot more noticeable than with other sounds. Like you can mess up a like synthesizer sound, all kinds. Like sometimes you can't even tell if a synthesizer's sound is backwards unless it has reverb on it, right? You don't know if it's backwards or forwards. It could just be a different envelope shape, right? So with vocal mixes, you're usually aiming for a more transparent feel. So most engineers are kind of aiming for the aesthetic where the vocal just like fell out of the singer's mouth magically perfect, as though it's like no makeup, woke up like this, right? So when you're trying to get a sound like that, you are trying to preserve the fidelity and you're not trying to like, mess it all up. Then less is more is like, how can you hit the targets that you're after in the most elegant processing chain with the least amount of steps? And I encourage you to embrace the principle of elegance in your music. Like, what's that quote? "'Tis vain to do with more what could be done with less," right? So both of these meanings of less is more are very useful as a producer. And there are, of course, many other ways to interpret this famous statement. But the more you work, the more you will see this principle in effect, and the more you will understand the wisdom behind it. All right, so let's talk about just use your ears. So just use your ears can either be the best advice you give someone, or it can be the worst advice you could give someone, depending entirely on their level of ear training, right? So an untrained ear is going to be fooled by things like volume. More always seems better. We always prefer the louder thing given two similar options. So this, especially coupled with soloing things all the time, often needs to overly loud sub bass, which might sound great in your studio, but then you go out and play it on a PA system and it's all out of balance and it will sound terrible and like, right? So yeah, there is such a thing as too much bass, but relative to the other sounds, right? Okay, so an untrained producer is also going to tend to listen to each sound on its own when making mix decisions, soloing each sound in turn, processing each sound so it sounds best by itself. The way I like to explain it is this: is like the problem with soloists is that they're not team players, right? And a band full of soloists can feel like a room full of cokeheads fighting to talk about themselves, right? I hate being in that room. So, both of these strategies, they're only as good as the targets you're aiming for. So you've got to improve your aim, right? Both strategies are only as effective as the targets they seek. Less is more, clearly target driven. It's like if you can accomplish something in less steps, that's better. If you can achieve an emotional result with less sounds, that's better, right? So that clearly depends on a target as a statement. But just use your ears is presuming that you've trained your ears and you have a reasonable idea of what sounds good, right? And that you're deciding what sounds good or bad in a relevant context. So if you want to make progress, you need some idea of where you're going. Sure, you might accidentally hit a bullseye once in a while, but your chances instantly go way up once you start aiming at the dartboard, right? So how do we identify our targets? So wait a minute, you might be saying, I thought music was entirely subjective. Wasn't that the premise of your entire talk today, Dylan? Yes, that's a fair question. So look at it this way, right? What we think we want and what we actually want are often two different things. Frequently, humans don't know exactly what they like until they check it out firsthand, which is why dating is a thing, right? So it looks like identifying targets is a task that, once again, comes down to studying, analyzing, and sometimes even recreating your favorite songs in as much detail as possible, right? And that's because there's no right way, there's no wrong way, there are no absolutes, there are only references. And at the end of the day, there's no use to any of this rule-breaking, dogma-rejecting, birds-up FU attitude without creative honesty and respect for your inspirations, right? So you remember how the 5-year-old coloring outside of the lines who didn't paint that Jackson Pollock painting and change the world of art forever? Yeah, well, that's right. Breaking the rules out of ignorance isn't going to get you anywhere. Breaking all the rules isn't going to get you anywhere either. Why do you break the rules then? Well, you break the rules so you can make your own rules. Making your own rules is where your style can really start to be felt. That's how you can really put your thumbprint on music, is be like, okay, I could do absolutely everything. Like, are you approaching music as a personal challenge? Are you approaching music to be like, look what I can do? Or are you trying to like make something that is like you? Are you trying to express yourself? Like, are you trying to see if you can work in all these different, because I mean that's cool too. Like I like to just sit down and be like, what have I never done before? I'm gonna do this. But approaching music as a personal challenge is not what resonates with fans as much, because your music to a fan, it's not about you, it's about them. It's about them. And when you can give them something that's like clearly very intentional and bespoke and like signature, that really resonates with people, right? So making your own rules is very, like, that's the name of the game. If you want to make a project that is like big, making a very specific set of rules for your music is how you forge a new style, a new identity, and how you really like make it feel like, whoa, this person is like cut from a different cloth, So you figure out exactly which rules to break, and then you break them specifically with intention, and you make your own new rules that you then follow your own rules. Because you can always break your own rules later. You can always flip the script. But that's the key, right? You need to ruthlessly and honestly identify every rule and assumption in the particular field of music you want to occupy. And then you decide for yourself, what do you keep and what do you throw away? And the only way to break the rules like an artist and not a 5-year-old coloring outside the lines is to immerse yourself in relevant art. And in your case, this means getting hardcore about curating your personal collection of reference tracks. So while breaking rules is essential, you must also remember we stand on the shoulders of giants, and that making an effort to understand the history of the music you want to make is actually one of the most enjoyable ways to spend your time. Like, I love when I'm like, you know what, today I'm just going to dive into music history and I'm going to listen. And even like putting together the notes for this. Oh, I listened to some great records when I put this together. It was such a pleasure, and that's, if I had one beef with like making music as a thing, it's that you can't listen to music while you do it because you need your speakers to make music. I do sometimes listen to music while I'm like programming sampler instruments or whatever, or like I'll put on a podcast and play modular, So sometimes, but yeah, you can't. But yeah, writing this, man, I listen to so much awesome music writing this. But yeah, it's not a chore like at all because the music you're studying, it's not like from some textbook, It's like your favorite music, and you will learn more from studying the pieces of music that shaped your taste than you will from any amount of like YouTube videos about music production or tutorials or whatever. Like you are going to learn way more from properly studying the music that changed your life than you will from that. And it's going to mean more to you and it's going to be more fun. Okay. That is a cold, hard fact. You'll learn more from studying a piece of music that shaped your taste than you will from endlessly watching YouTube videos about music production. So why? Why is that more effective? Well, you know good music when you hear it, don't you? Right? You love music. You listen to music all the time. You know what good music is. So in a recent interview with Anderson Cooper, the legendary producer Rick Rubin shocked the world, but not me, by openly admitting that he, quote, doesn't know much about music, that he, quote, has no technical ability, and I love this one, and that he, quote, does not know how to operate a mixing console. So this flabbergasted Anderson Cooper, who has clearly never used a patch bay, but it shouldn't be confusing to you after what we've learned today. So, when Anderson Cooper was like, and like he asked him what skill he did possess, Rick Rubin replies, "Well, I know what I like, and I know what I don't like, and I'm decisive about what I like and what I don't like, because he is a Zen master." Oh, I love Rick Rubin. But yeah, that's the skill that makes a producer great. Okay. The real skill is not knowing which plugins to buy. It's not knowing whose dogma to accept. It isn't being a follower at all. It is being a leader. It's becoming a tastemaker, an innovator, someone who uses sound to lift us up and show us like a whole new world of possibility. The blue ocean. Not the red ocean full of sharks eating each other, but a blue ocean. That's what we want. We want you to take us somewhere new where anything is possible, and taking us to a place that like feels like it was pulled from dreams we didn't know we had. A place where we can escape from the everyday world and lose ourselves in the absolute mind-bending sci-fi witchcraft that is modern music production. Take us there and keep us there. That's your job. We need music, and we especially need music when life is hard. Because as one of my favorite philosophers ever, Friedrich Nietzsche, famously said, life without music is a mistake. So even the famously reclusive and prolific philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche needed to get away from it all sometimes. He needed to feel a sense of poetry to offset the grim prose he penned and the decidedly unpoetic realities he saw outside his window every day, because he lived in Germany, and Germany was in active collapse after World War I. The fascists were rapidly taking over not only the country, but the imagination of the public. And he was watching lies, myths, delusions, anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, ableism, xenophobia, all that, turning brother against brother as his country picked sides, doubled down, and descended into madness. Good thing nothing like that's ever happened again, right? Oh, God. Look, the only reason to make music is because you have to. That's the only real reason. I've said it before. Said it again. The only real reason to make music is because you have to. If you're only using music as a way to get fame or sex or money, there are way more direct routes to any of these objectives. If you just want to get famous, you can pull stunts on YouTube. If you just want big social media numbers, you can post controversial things that make people fight in the comments. The algorithms love that. If you just want sex, you could either pay for it or make a Tinder profile. And if you just want to make money, you could sell dick pills. It's the best way to make money. But you're not doing that, are you? Right? No, instead of doing any of those things, you've chosen to watch this video. You've invested your valuable time learning and growing and challenging your assumptions like a good producer, because you know that deep down you have to do this. You have to make music because you can't stand the idea of going to your grave without taking your shot and seeing just how far you can take it. Well, you're not alone. You're not weird. I get it. Trust me, I feel the exact same way. That's why I teach. I know in the very depths of my being that music is my purpose in life. If there's a reason for anything in my life, it's that I was put on earth to make music and to help other people. My mother's a teacher who specialized in outreach work, and my father, who raised me, is a full-time guitarist who's played with many of the top names in his field. Okay, so the apple didn't fall far from the tree. But you know, when I was first learning to produce, because my dad is a guitar player, he was not a producer, I encountered gatekeeper after gatekeeper after gatekeeper. You know, I mean, I started back in the day when like everybody kept their secrets like super close, and like even DJs would like black out the records so you couldn't find out what they were playing and stuff. It was so competitive and so just like miserable. Like that's just a toxic mindset, and it makes you miserable. Like when you view every other producer or DJ as competition, then like the club is not a recreational place anymore. It's a war zone. And like that takes a toll, man. That takes a toll. Like, but yeah, so there's gatekeepers, there's like everybody's hiding their secrets, and like just all these people trying to make money. And like I'm like really, like I said, I'm really idealistic about music, and I get frustrated when there's people that are like making things shittier for other people to make money. There's bad advice everywhere, and those who did know how to do it, they tended to keep their mouths shut for fear of the competition, which is why there's that old adage, those who can't teach, which is outdated nonsense, and it has to go. Plenty of amazing people teach. Noisia teaches. Koan Sound teaches. Mr. Bill teaches. You know, Ahi teaches. Pedestrian Tactics teaches. Like top-notch producers teach, okay? You know, like Chi has a class. Saruda has a class, all right? So music is not a sport. It's not a competition, all right? Well, I love friendly competitions like remix contests, DJ battles, and the dojo sparring tournaments that we have inside the dojo. They are only beneficial when they're built on a collaborative spirit. The reason I left the breakdance scene, I used to be a breakdance DJ when I was in high school, but the reason I left that scene was the disappointment that I felt after watching these like super cool creative breakdance battles degenerate into literal brawls at the end of the night. It's so childish, it's so counterproductive. But the good thing about battling is that it triggers this like deep-seated evolutionary programming we all have that we can harness for motivation. But the end of the day, we're all on the same team, all right? And as I see it, music is a revolutionary uniting force that stands as an end in itself, right? And that means that the value of music does not depend on anything else except for the experience of music itself. But unfortunately, industrial capitalism commodifies absolutely everything. And under capitalism, the world is reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. Everything is just a means to an end, and that end is short-term financial gain. To maximize shareholder profits, all possible costs are externalized, and all possible value is extracted from the system so that it can be delivered to the owners. Under capitalism, music is only good when its owners get rich. So ask yourself, is the most popular music really the best music? Now, don't get me wrong. Some popular music is excellent. I love and often make music that falls into the pop category. But, big but, I seldom find myself enjoying the music of the like uber pop megastars, as it feels like all the decisions about that creation process was made by a room full of suits and test audiences. You know, it's like, it just reeks of inauthenticity and calculated misrepresentation. It's just all these like sickly sweet bubblegum sounds that have been neutered of all vitality and watered down by focus group testing to form a sound so aggressively bland you could just rub it in a baby's eyes. If pop radio were a color, it would be landlord beige. That's how I feel about that. So you got to have underground solidarity. You know what I'm saying? It's us against that. Our music, real music, is an inherently subversive and humanistic force that stands in vibrant opposition to the corporate takeover of cultural space. Just as graffiti is a rejection of the visual takeover of public space, underground music is a rejection of the corporate takeover of our cultural spaces. So while I encourage competition within the dojo to motivate my members to be their best and, tap into all that biological programming, it's important to remember that the real threat, if there even is one, is external. But it's us in the underground versus the soulless paper monsters traded on the stock exchange, right? Together, we're fighting for the hearts and minds of the masses as they circle dangerously close to the drain. It's a battle of meaning and meaninglessness, and only one of these two can feed the soul. So that's why I fight every day with all my heart for producers like you. I have not missed a weekly download class in 322 weeks. I came up with a new topic every week, 322 weeks. I teach on my birthdays. I never take a full day off because I love what I do and it doesn't feel like work. Running a marathon for charity, right, is a popular personal fitness challenge. But do you know the real horrifying reason that we call it a marathon? So all marathons are run in the honor of a Greek soldier named Phidippides, who famously ran between 24 and 26 miles to warn the city of Marathon that it was about to be sacked by an invading army. So that means that Phidippides was running not only for his own life, but for the lives of everyone he knew. So the first marathon ever was likely the most traumatic stress of Phidippides' entire life. Okay, that was the first marathon. So the difference between traumatic stress and a fun challenge is often mental, right? Same distance. In one situation, total nightmare. In another situation, super fun challenge. Same distance, same run. You're still trying to get there as fast as you can, right? So why is one trauma and one is not? So in my experience, the path of a music producer can either wear you down or build you up depending on your mental outlook. And you will often hear learning to produce music referred to as a marathon, right? So you want to run it like the fun way, right? It's the same difference between a bunch of soccer moms fun running a charity marathon and Phidippides' not so fun run to save the city of Marathon from total annihilation, right? You want to flip the switch, okay? You got to flip the switch in your mind. So I obviously cannot teach you everything I know about mixing in this one video, especially the technical part. But I hope that I've helped flip your mixing switch from traumatic stress mode to the vastly preferable fun challenge setting. And that's the setting that made the difference for me. That's the foundation of all my progress, right? That's the tipping point. That is the key that unlocked the rest and made it all feel effortless. Okay? That's what made it feel effortless, was making it fun, breaking the rules, using my hands, using things wrong, questioning assumptions, finding shit that everybody else was doing that I specifically on purpose was not doing. Finding stuff that everybody else was not doing that I specifically on purpose did. That's like a fun game with your mixing. That's a fun game you can play. And it's like, it's kind of like your reward for finding Easter eggs in your favorite tracks. Right? And when you start approaching it like that, that makes it super fun. That makes it super fun. So the technical part, it does take time though. There's no way around that. Well, I've given you the key by flipping the switch from traumatic stress mode to fun challenge mode. And I've given you the map by sharing the everything you know is wrong list. The journey ahead will inevitably take some time, okay? If you want to become a complete producer by mastering the mix, there's no way around training your ears by analyzing your references and analyzing them on lots of sound systems, like not just your studio monitors. So I'm not going to lie to you and pretend it's a horrible chore listening to your favorite music, because it's not. Like, listening to your favorite music in detail is super fun, okay? And I'm not going to lie to you and say mixing is hard or that you should leave it to the pros, but what I am going to tell you is how I would continue to teach you if we had more time together. If you made it this far, you probably want to hear the rest, right? Right. So, in my experience, immersive multi-day training scenarios yield the fastest growth and the deepest transformations. Just like doing a musical collab in person versus online, one is more fun, while the other one tends to feel like homework. So the best way to get those hours, just get them into your brain and remember it afterwards and everything, is to like make a story of it. You know, go to a place, hang out with your friends and have a good time. And then suddenly, before you know it, you're at the finish line and you're nostalgic that it's over. And because it didn't happen in the same room that you're always in, you can vividly recall every detail because it's like a quirk of how the brain is. You know, we remember what happens when we go out, but we don't remember what happens when we sit in the same chair we sit in every day, right? So it's just more fun that way. And time flies when you're having fun. And it's just like, you know, when you're hanging out with other producers and stuff, it's rad. Like it's super fun. So what I've done is I've secured an absolutely killer venue in Portland, Oregon in April. And I am hosting a weekend-long mix and masterclass where I can demonstrate all the juicy technical stuff for you and get into detail with that list as well as lots of other stuff. And I'm going to demonstrate it for you on a Function One PA at the North Warehouse. Oh yeah. It's because my buddy Scotty, who owns the North Warehouse, is an amazing person. He manages Antennae currently, but he used to manage like all these famous rappers like Nicki Minaj before he realized he's like way too nice a dude to be like managing famous rappers. So he you know, made his way through the music industry and was very successful at a lot of different things. And now he has his own space and he created like, it's like the perfect underground warehouse party that never ends. It's like if Willy Wonka had 48-inch Function One subs. Okay. I love it. It's so dope. So Scotty is yeah, he's very cool. He's nice enough to let us use his space. So Scotty's allowed us to use it on the Friday night in April before the weekend teaching event. And I'm going to be doing a private audio video performance just for you as Chill Gates, which is my alias that I make like rap and down tempo and IDM and like Sunday morning festival music. It's kind of like more like the roots of Ill Gates, but I like making bangers too. And most of the time when I get booked, people want to hear like more aggressive, like upbeat party music, which I also love. But the Chill Gates alias is like some of the I mean, that's just a lot of that stuff gets more plays on my Spotify. It's just not what promoters want to book as much, but I really dig it. So I'm doing a Chill Gates AV performance on the Friday before we get started, and there's time slots up for grabs for participants who are coming to the mix and master class. And you got to submit a demo. You know, we're not putting anybody on unless they're like super awesome. And there's probably going to be stiff competition, but this way we have like a social event before the mix and masterclass kicks off where you can loosen up, get situated, network with the other attendees, and maybe even perform on a Function One for everybody. Okay, so solid start to the weekend. And then Saturday and Sunday have a really detailed curriculum planned from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. each day, showing you everything about the approach that I used on my song that Dolby selected to demo their Atmos technology, as well as the approach that I used for tracks that I made for like Star Wars and the Gucci Mane, Alanis Morissette, 42 Doug, Apache, Mr. Bill, etc. Same approach I've used for all those tracks. And I won't hold anything back because remember, it's not a competition. It's a collaboration. And like, look, nothing would make me prouder than seeing you take my tools and techniques to the mountaintop and give me a shout out from on high. I love that. I want to be in your Grammy acceptance speech after we stick it to the suits by giving the people something real. And I want to see your eyes light up while you tell me about going to a concert where your favorite artist surprised you by mixing in one of your songs without knowing you were in the audience. I've had that experience a couple times. It's the best. I want that to happen to you, and I want to see you tell me about it and see the look in your face while you tell me about that. I want to hear all about how you went on to pass the inspiration to the next generation of musicians. And these are the thoughts that I want to be having on my deathbed, okay? Like, that's why I do this. I want the DJ to play your music at my funeral. And I want everyone there to just dance their asses off like it's Second Line in New Orleans, okay? So, I often get asked, like, what's your greatest inspiration? And it's kind of cheesy and weird to say it, but it is my own inevitable death. And while death is like a taboo a little bit, I think thinking about it and thinking about the regrets of the dying, I think is something really valuable for people who are alive. So there's this book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, and it is mind-blowing. Okay, so it was written by this hospice nurse, which is like, giving people care at the end of their life, named Bronnie Ware. I think she's English, and it changed my life forever. Bronnie's unenviable job is to sit beside the elderly and infirm as they shuffle their way off this mortal coil and into the sweet embrace of eternity. She would provide them medical care, she would hold their hands, and perhaps most importantly, she would listen. So despite what all the cultural warriors out there would have you believe, humans are far more alike than we are different. And our Saint Bronnie noticed that there are 5 main regrets people have as they are dying. So spoiler alert, not one of these involves spending more time on social media. So anyway, pay careful attention to our words, because I don't think there's a single more relevant thing that I could share with you as a fellow music producer. All right. So here are the top 5 regrets of the dying as witnessed by Bronnie Ware. Number 1, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And then this is her quote. This was the most common regret of all. When people realize that their life is almost over and they look back clearly on it, it's easy to see how many dreams have gone unfulfilled. Most people had not honored even half of their dreams and had to die knowing that it was due to choices that they made or not made. Health brings a freedom very few realize until they no longer have it. Number 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And this is her quote. This came from every male patient that I nursed. They missed their children's youth and their partner's companionship. Women also spoke of this regret, but as most were from an older generation, many of the female patients had not been breadwinners. All of the men I nursed deeply regretted spending so much of their lives on the treadmill of a work existence. All right, number 3. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. Many people suppress their feelings in order to keep peace with others. As a result, they settled for a mediocre existence and never became who they were truly capable of becoming. Many developed illnesses related to the bitterness and resentment that they carried as a result. Number 4, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Often they would not truly realize the full benefit of old friends until their dying weeks, and it was not always possible to track them down. Many become so caught up in their own lives that they had let golden friendships slip by over the years. There are many deep regrets about not giving friendships the time and effort that they deserved. Everyone misses their friends when they're dying. And then number 5, I wish I had let myself be happier. This is a surprisingly common one. Many did not realize until the end that happiness is a choice. They had stayed stuck in old patterns and habits. The so-called comfort of familiarity overflowed into their emotions as well as their physical lives. Fear of change had them pretending to others and to themselves that they were content, when deep within they longed to laugh properly and have silliness in their life again. So do these 5 not sound like they were written specifically for music producers? Living a life true to your values, not selling all your time to a soulless corporation, expressing yourself, connecting with friends, and letting yourself be happy. They are the exact things that a life dedicated to music yields. It could not possibly be more specific. So the next time someone tells you it's like irrational or indulgent to pursue art music, cup stacking, Dungeons and Dragons, modular synths, or like whatever makes you happy, You can mention the top 5 regrets of the dying and ask them how they're doing with their own progress. That usually shuts them up real quick. Because, like, your happiness and your well-being are important. Okay? Your happiness and your well-being should be a priority to you. You know, stop putting your own happiness and your own well-being last. You know, I'm like a pathological people pleaser, and I have had to learn to do this. Like, to really, that if you're not living a life that's like authentic to your own values and you're not being honest about your emotions, you can't serve others as well. Okay? So if you're a people pleaser, just remember, like, you need to be right in yourself to be able to serve others to your full capacity. So you have to put your happiness and your well-being, you know, you have to prioritize them, right? And check this out. This is going to blow your mind. Okay? This part is going to blow your mind. So if you had to guess the rate of mental health issues among musicians, what would you guess it is? Probably higher than the general population, right? Right? So if I told you that France's INSART, INSAART, recently did a study comparing depression symptoms in musicians to the general populace, and I told you that the general populace tested at 12%, what would you guess the rate among musicians is, right? Like, guess. Like 24%, that would be pretty high, right? That's double the rate of the general population, right? That would be pretty high. Do you want to take a guess? The depression rate among musicians is 72% versus 12 in the general population. 72%. That is a shocking difference. Okay, and the percentage seems stable. And there's another study in Sweden done by the Record Union, and that one came out even higher at 73% have symptoms of depression. 73%. So there's little in these particular studies to suggest the direction of causality, right? Which is an important question in any study. You know, do depressed people decide to become musicians, or does being a musician make you depressed, right? That's not addressed in the study, but self-reports from musicians, including my own experience that I shared at the beginning, that is the entire point of this video, say that creativity offers relief from depression, and that the worlds we create with our art or music give us a sense of control in an increasingly out of control world. Okay? So I want to talk about unlearning helplessness. Okay? Because remember, this was such a key part of my depression at the beginning, but part of why I hated mixing and part of why I wasn't getting better at mixing is I had learned helplessness. Okay? So learned helplessness is a phenomenon whereby the perception of a lack of control over the negative forces impacting your life is known to directly cause depression, right? And this is the exact belief that all of these ads and, you know, just like all of capitalism is like basically built on teaching people, you're helpless, you need our product to help you. And I mean, you know, it keeps the lights on, keeps the trains running on time, but at what cost, right? So it doesn't matter whether you actually have control over the negative events in your life or whether you have just the perception that you're helpless. The perception of helplessness, that is what directly causes depression. I mean, one of the things, other things, you know, of course, cause depression, but that is one of the things that directly causes depression. And this causal relationship between learned helplessness and depression is so reliable that when you want to test antidepressant drugs on like rats or mice or whatever, the nearly universal procedure at these laboratories is to teach the animals learned helplessness until they, even though they have the ability to turn the shocks off, they don't, because they've learned that they can't. So even though they could, they don't. And when they don't help themselves anymore, then you test your Prozac on them or whatever, right? So there's a recent study in the UK regarding the effectiveness of group drumming therapy. Much less horrible than Teaching rats learned helplessness. So there's a recent study in the UK regarding the effectiveness of group drumming therapy as a treatment for anxiety and depression. So they had the subjects self-reporting symptoms as well as social resilience and a general well-being over the course of 10 treatments. And each of the treatments was like a 90-minute session. I think like 80 minutes was drumming and 10 minutes was just talking about it and vibing out with the other people that were there. And they had 10 of these sessions over 10 weeks. Okay, so in addition to the psychological measurements of like self-reported anxiety and depression symptoms and well-being and social resilience, they also had physiological measurements like inflammatory immune response over the duration of the treatment, as well as the presence of the stress hormone cortisol. And cortisol is a hormone that is secreted that has all kinds of terrible effects in your body, but it is secreted when your body perceives that it's in a stressful environment, right? So Pheidippides running his marathon, cortisol city. You know, soccer mom's fun run marathon, no cortisol, right? So they're assessing the cortisol in their saliva samples as a measure of stress, right? All right. So now we're going to play the guessing game again. Let's see if you can guess how effective music is at treating anxiety and depression, shall we? All right. So I'm going to give you some clues again. So if I told you that, medications for anxiety and depression, they work in like if you have 100 people, they'll work in 60 to 80 of those 100 people. So that's pretty good. It does have a solid, there's not that many people that it just doesn't work on. And that usually, most of these medications, they'll reduce self-reported symptoms between 15 to 20%. So like it doesn't go away entirely. Like you're still anxious, you're still a little bit, bummed, but it can be higher, but on average 15 to 20%. So if pharmaceuticals, the best pharmaceuticals we can make are reducing anxiety and depression symptoms by 15 to 20%, right? How much would you guess music therapy reduces these symptoms? Like 10% would be pretty good, right? Without drugs, that's half as effective as drugs. That would be a big deal, right? Especially considering that there's no side effects, there's no neurotoxicity, no habituation, no withdrawal, no other issues that come from pharmaceutical methods. Half as effective with no side effects. That would be a big deal, right? Okay, so time to make your guess. What do you think the rate of reduction of the symptoms? So this is not how many people it worked on, because it was a pretty sizable number. It wasn't every single person, but it was like 80-90% of the people it did work on. This therapy did work on them. But how much of a reduction in self-reported anxiety and depression symptoms are we talking in these drum therapy sessions? Okay, so if drugs do 15 to 20%, sometimes more, how much do you think? Group drum therapy for 10 weeks. How much do you think it? Make your guess. All right. So music therapy sessions reduced anxiety by 20% and depression by a whopping 40%. That's crazy. That is more than drugs, right? Those are massive numbers. Like, wow. So I gotta link the studies, but you can literally just type in group drumming, anxiety, depression in Google, and you'll see that this was one of many studies with similar findings. Okay, so multiple studies also showed a decrease in cortisol levels, increased social resilience, and an increase in self-reported levels of well-being. So again and again, research has found that engaging in musical activity is much more than just a fun thing to do. Okay? Music is medicine. Music is quite literally, measurably, demonstrably evidence-based medicine, and that is a non-alternative scientific fact. All right? Okay, so I got to make a disclaimer now because I've talked about medical stuff. So while I have an avid interest in psychology, I am not a licensed psychologist, psychiatrist, pharmacist, or mental health professional in any capacity. I'm an expert only in the domain of music and music education. When I express my opinions based on these studies, you need to know that they are just that, my personal opinions. If you're experiencing any mental health issues, it's important to consult a mental health professional before making any decisions, such as starting, stopping, or modifying the course of your prescription medications. Okay? All right. So I want to give you my opinions now on the role of finishing in mental health. And this is a big part of why I used to hate mixing and why I love it now. Okay, so this is my non-expert opinion as a musician and music educator, not as a mental health professional. But when I recall my own struggles with depression, anxiety, addiction, and other mental health issues, as well as the self-reported mental health assessments of my musician friends and my students, I've noticed another pattern that I would be remiss if I did not bring to light. So, for producers, the best mental health benefits are gained from finished work. So, unfinished work can cause feelings of powerlessness. And it is my experience and my non-expert opinion that completed work is what yields the greatest mental benefits. You know, I often get students coming to me in a state of acute mental suffering due to their inability to complete their work. They'll tell me that just like me, just like I was when I hated mixing, that they're deeply upset when they can't finish their work and that they would do anything to end their suffering and finally just finish it up. And when I teach them to finish their work, because this is my specialty as an educator, like this is all, that's always, I've always been like finishing first. That's what makes the whole cycle going is finish. It's the first thing. Before you get good, finish, right? So this is my specialty as an educator. So before I teach them to finish their, once I teach them to finish their work, they universally report feelings of satisfaction, validation, creative power, happiness, and overall well-being as a direct result of finally finishing all those songs they care about so much. So this matches my own experience exactly. You know, when I finally started finishing songs like on the reg, and I didn't have this, like, I used to call it the folder of shame. Like that, it was so, the negative self-talk was so bad. But I used to call my folder of project folders, I would call it the folder of shame because it was just all unfinished projects. And once I started finishing them, it was like this just weight got off of my chest and my whole reality changed. And that was a big part of why I started teaching was I was just like, this was a nightmare. And there's information that people are keeping from me that if I just knew that information, I wouldn't have had that nightmare, you know? So I was like, I need to shout this from the mountaintops, right? So this experience that student after student tell me, it matches my own personal experience exactly. And if you held a gun to my head and made me guess, I would say that unfinished work takes a toll on one's mental health and that finished work pays dividends in the same regard. I suspect that future psychological studies would support my hypothesis, but I'm not a scientist or mental health professional. And frankly, I did terrible on my statistics exam when Tipper stayed at my house, and it probably ruined my chances of graduating with honors anyway. But it's a price I happily paid, and I'd do it again. I regret nothing. Tipper is the king. Anyway, so what would I rather be doing than conducting my study of the relationship of finished versus unfinished work to mental health? Well, that's running my mix and master class in Portland, Oregon, and getting you finishing your music and feeling great. That's what I would rather be doing. Seriously, it's going to be amazing. The last few immersive educational events I did with my producer Dojo crew came out better than any of us had ever hoped, right? Like EP Boot Camp and the 808 Classic. We had really big hopes for these, you know? There were no refunds or complaints. Everyone had a great time hanging out with their fellow producers, and it was like Matrix level skill downloads for all the participants. And the music that they've been making speaks for itself. You know, the Dojo is on crush mode all day, every day. You know, we saw Dojo member Shadowstar win first place in Deadmau5's new artist competition and get signed to Mousetrap alongside Dojo fan Pedestrian Tactics. So we got 2 in there now. We've seen Echo Zoo and Rip Kenny both go like well over 1 million plays on Spotify for a couple years running. This afternoon, DJ Yon, who is like a good homie of mine, and in the dojo, he landed an official vocal recording from Pavan from Foreign Beggars. It's arguably the biggest name in like EDM rap in Europe. You know, that's a pretty big deal. Dreamtonic and Crypto Chronica made music for the Star Wars Hotel. Ionize gets millions and millions of plays on his songs and music videos. He worked with like Rick Ross, Gucci Mane. He's got a tune with Ghostface, went on tour with Ghostface, T.I. Made a tune with Prodigy from Mobb Deep before he died. Like just this laundry list of rap names. I was just hanging out with him in Puerto Rico. It was so fun. We've watched Raven Schoon and Rekno, who had one of his first releases on the Dojo label, and now they're like stadium DJs. We've watched Not Low become a household name in dubstep after getting signed to Truth's Deep, Dark, and Dangerous level. I can't even keep up anymore. I can't. Every week I hear another story just like those coming out of the dojo, but none of it's possible without finishing your work. And finishing your work isn't possible without mixing and mastering. So now we're at crossroads. You have a decision to make. If you always do what you've always done, you will always get what you've always got. And if you're happy with that, great. I'm happy for you. It's good to be happy. I fully support happy people, right? It's good to be stoked with what you already have. But if you are like me, you know that you can't be really happy unless you're making the music you were born to make. If you feel this way, you're in the minority of the human population, but like I said, you're not alone, okay? I get it. I know. That's why I had this whole big talk about mixing and music and mental health and breaking the rules and all that is because I get it. This is what I needed to know, you know, when I was in that hell. And I don't hold back. You know, I've been training the very best of the best for 15 years or more. And my community of students, I still hate using that word, but my community of students includes Grammy winners like Seal, household names like Apache, Dr. Fresh, and Illenium, underground producers like G. Jones, Minnesota, Chi, killer live acts like Danny Asadi, like crazy finger drumming mastermind, Iodo, Beats Antique, house music staples like Morgan Page and Claude Von Stroke. You know, he told me a couple weeks ago he used my templates. And of course, world famous educators like Mr. Bill, Andrew Huang, and Ahi. And just the other day, 9-time Grammy nominee Damian Taylor, I met him and he told me he credits me with breaking through his writer's block. I was like, what? And he went on to get 9 Grammy nominations and produce for Bjork and Arcade Fire. And he has used my Moog sub-bass multi-samples from the dojo on most of his Grammy-winning records. That's crazy. So I basically have Grammy-nominated Moog subs. So while I can't promise you a Grammy if you come to my mixing class, I can promise you the same Grammy-nominated Moog subs that Damon Taylor uses. Yes. And I can say with total honesty that you can check that not one, but many of my students have gone on to become world famous producers that sit comfortably at the very top of their field. And then my own track record as Ill Gates. You know, I have not been nominated for a Grammy, but I've got 58 million plays, 275 songs released. I've played over 1,000 live shows on 5 continents, been in the iTunes top 10 many times. I've got releases with the winners of 9 Grammys, did music for Star Wars at Disneyland. I had a track that I did get into GTA 5. I've got official releases with Gucci Mane, Alanis Morissette, 42 Doug, Action Bronson was on that GTA 5 one, Apache, G. Jones, Minnesota, EPROM. I remixed the first ever EPROM record, and I got him on this Ionize record with 42 Doug called Look What I Got. That connected those two. Excision, Destroyed, Liquid Strangers remixed my music. I've done tracks with Beats Antique, KJ Saka, best drummer in all of electronic music. Mr. Bill, of course, Sodown, Closey, Ionize, Dub Effects, Andrew Huang, Ahi, Opio, Mimosa, and you can like tons of other people. But it's not about my credentials. It is about your potential. Okay, if you've ever heard music in your dreams, guess what? You wrote it. That was the sound of hot, exclusive, unreleased brain dub plates. Okay, you wrote that music. You produced that music. It existed in that dream world, okay? It's just making it exist in the real world. That's the problem. So I know that potential is in you. I know it for a fact because I have watched the same potential blossom again and again and again in my students while they go from not making music to being world class. Now, if you're ready to join them, I'm ready to take you there. This is your chance to fall in love with mixing and mastering and have me as your guide, and I'll teach you all the technical stuff that was not in that video now that the switch has been flipped and your perspective has changed, okay? So it's time now to take your shot or forever wonder what could have been. Thanks for watching. Lots of love, and I'll see you in Portland, baby. Peace out.